It's 7 p.m. Wednesday, April 3rd here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. South Korea decides to open up trails leading up to the DMZ to civilians for the first time since the end of the Korean War.
The South Korean Defense Ministry, for the first time in 7 decades, expresses condolences to victims of the April 3rd Jeju Incident.
Voting is well underway for South Korea's by-elections. The results are expected to show the public sentiment ahead of next year's general elections.
A South Korean vessel suspected of having links to oil transfers to North Korea is detained in Busan. We have the latest details.
The WTO cut its forecast for global trade growth, warning that global trade will have to weather the storm throughout this year. NEWSCENTER begins now. Hello and welcome to Arirang NEWSCENTER. I'm Han-dan in Seoul.
And I'm Noam. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. South Korea is planning to build hiking trails leading up to the demilitarized zone and allowing civilians access to them.
In doing so, the government hopes to turn what was once viewed as the scars from the Korean War into a symbolic area for peace. Kan Hyung-woo starts us off.
South Korea is opening up 3 hiking trails leading up to the DMZ to allow civilian access to the area for the first time since the end of the Korean War in 1953.
The government will do all it can to transform the DMZ, a scar from the war that separated 2 Koreas, into the front line of peace and prosperity. We will eventually make it a symbolic place for world peace and nature.
Tentatively called the DMZ Peace Trails, they involve the 3 South Korean border towns of Paju, Cheolwon, and Gosong, one each in the west, the center, and the east. In late April, the government first plans to start a pilot program at the Gosong Trail, where visitors will be able to go either on foot or by vehicle and get as close as possible to the DMZ. The opening dates for the Paju and Cheolwon trails have not been set. Some are concerned about safety since the trails go through certain areas where the military is active. But civilians will be escorted by heavily armed soldiers and will carry bulletproof vests and helmets. Seoul's Defense Ministry is in discussions with UN Command to get approval for civilians to go into the DMZ and to ensure their safety. For the Peace Trail project, the Unification Ministry's Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Council has approved $3.9 million. Those hoping to walk along the Gosong Trail can apply for a lottery on the websites of the Ministry of the Interior and Safety and the Korea Tourism Organization starting April 11th. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Jeju Island is known as one of Korea's most popular holiday destinations, but it does have a dark past, being the location for one of the most tragic chapters of South Korea's turbulent modern history. Our Won Jung-hwan has this report on the April 3rd Jeju Incident and how it's being remembered today.
On April 3rd of 1948, public anger came to the fore when repressed civilians staged an uprising against police and right-wing groups, resulting in a period of turmoil on Jeju Island. To commemorate and raise public awareness of the April 3rd Jeju Incident that happened 71 years ago, a 5-day event is being held at Gwanghwamun Plaza in central Seoul. While those passing through the public space can get a glimpse of the history, it seems that, with the passing of time, the incident is fading from memory. In a recent public survey commissioned by the Jeju April 3rd Peace Foundation, only 7 out of 10 respondents said they knew about the Jeju incident.
There's a lack of interest. Last year, when we had a similar event here in Seoul, it was quite big as the event marked the 70th anniversary. But this year, the budget and interest is a lot lower.
In fact, government efforts to verify the truth behind the incident began only in the late 1990s. And following President Moon's apology to the victims last year, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon visited the island on Wednesday to vow again that the government will make the utmost efforts to lay the legal groundwork for state compensation to the fullest extent possible.
We will keep working until we piece together the truth, help you clear your names, and hear every one of you in Jeju telling us that this would be enough.
But even with the government's effort to help raise awareness of the incident, there is still a long way to go as the families of victims still suffer from gruesome memories and deep trauma.
Even a few years ago, myself and my son suffered a great deal of pain as we were labeled as the offspring of commies. We simply couldn't talk about the incident.
Decades have passed, but the pain of the incident still runs deep. But with efforts to raise awareness, just like the event here in Seoul continues, the victims could someday uncover the truth and achieve justice from the island's dark history. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
And for the first time in 71 years, South Korea's defense ministry has expressed regret and condolences over the bloody military crackdown during the April 3rd Jeju Incident. Marking the day, both the ruling and opposition parties put their heads together to seek compensation for the victims and their families. Our Cha Sang-mi has this report.
It's been over 7 decades since nearly 30,000 people were killed in a horrific massacre on Jeju Island, including newborns, pregnant women, and the elderly. The killings took place over a span of 7 years, wiping out around 10% of Jeju's entire population at the time. And on Wednesday, the Vice Minister of Defense Seo Ju-seok visited the memorial space set up at Seoul's Gwanghwamun Plaza to pay respects to the victims.
We are extremely sorry. We will do our best to join the government's efforts to find truth, restore the honor of the victims, and heal the wounds of the bereaved families.
Earlier, the Defense Ministry itself delivered an official apology and acknowledged the sacrifices of Jeju's residents. A ministry official said the Defense Ministry agrees with the Legislative Act, recognizing that civilians were killed in a civil disturbances and armed conflicts with the military that began on the 3rd of April, 1948. The law was enacted in 1999, but problems still linger regarding compensation for the victims and the bereaved families. The survivors, too, have suffered immense trauma after being labeled communists and being forced to stay silent about it for decades.
The government should promptly restore the honor of those falsely accused and get rid of this grudge that's held against their descendants.
Both the ruling and opposition parties gathered together to talk about revising the special act to compensate the victims and their relatives. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
In other news, preparations to hold inter-Korean video reunions for families separated by the Korean War have begun in South Korea. Earlier today, Seoul started renovating 13 facilities across the country that will be used for the event. Arirang's Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee has the details.
Here at the Seoul headquarters of South Korea's Red Cross, officials are removing old monitors, cameras, and communication devices. Last used in 2007, these can't be used anymore as communication technology has moved on. By the end of this month, new equipment and communication lines will be installed. This as South Korea renovates 13 facilities around the country, 5 in the capital and 8 in other cities, that'll be used for the video reunions of families separated by the Korean War.
Inter-Korean video reunions stopped since 2007, so we need to install new network devices, video equipment, and communication lines.
The key focus, making it convenient for the elderly. Video reunions first came up as an alternative to face-to-face reunions for people aged over 90, as the journey across the border to the North's Kim-Gangsan resort was too much of a burden for them.
4 facilities out of 13 in the country will be completely rebuilt. Meeting rooms on the 2nd floor or in the basement will be moved to the 1st floor to help the elderly.
From 2005 to 2007, there have been 7 rounds of inter-Korean video reunions where a total of over 3,700 people from South and North Korea were able to talk with their relatives from the other side of the border. The leaders of the two Koreas agreed at their summit last September to work on resuming these for the long-lost families on both sides. Through its bilateral working group meeting with the U.S. last month, Seoul did receive sanctions waivers to renovate video reunions facilities in the north and deliver necessary items across the border. But renovations of North Korean facilities hasn't started yet, as South Korea has not talked with Pyongyang. And the dates of the video reunions and the much-needed inter-Korean Red Cross talks are also yet to be announced. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea has, for the first time, seized a local ship for allegedly dodging UN sanctions on North Korea. The tanker joins 3 other foreign vessels that Seoul has been holding for suspected violations. EG1 has more.
A South Korean tanker suspected to have been involved in the illicit ship-to-ship transfer of oil to North Korea has been detained in the southern port city of Busan for months. This is the first time a South Korea flagship has been detained under such circumstances. According to a foreign affairs source, the vessel has been detained since October last year and is under investigation to identify whether it has violated UN sanctions. This allegedly comes as a U.S. source told South Korea that the ship transferred refined oil to a North Korean vessel while out at sea. UNSC Resolution 2397 allows countries to seize and inspect vessels if there is reasonable grounds that the vessel was involved in activities with the North. If found guilty, the vessel could be listed on the UNSC sanctions list, a first for a South Korean vessel. The ship also faces charges locally as it violates the Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Act that requires all ships carrying cargo between the 2 Koreas to be approved by Seoul's unification minister. Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry says it's working with the U.S. and the UN Sanctions Committee on deciding whether to continue holding the ship. This is also the case for 3 other ships South Korea is holding for their alleged trade with the North. They are the Hong Kong-registered oil tanker Lighthouse Wenmore, the Panama-flagged tanker Cody, and the Togo-flagged Talent Ace. Ship-to-ship transfers of goods in and out of North Korea have reportedly been increasing over recent years. Recently, the U.S. Treasury Department listed a South Korean vessel named Lunis on its watch list for vessels suspected to have engaged in ship-to-ship transfers with North Korean tankers. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, let's turn to some local politics. South Korea is holding by-elections today for 2 seats in parliament. Although it's a mini-election, it's important to the political parties as it should give them a read on public sentiment ahead of next year's general elections. For more, let's connect live now to our political correspondent Kim Min-ji, who is standing by at the National Assembly for us. Min-ji, I believe voting is still underway?
That's right, Adam. The polling stations come to a close in about an hour's time now. And since this morning, voters in the districts of Changwon, Seongsan and Tongyang-Gosang, both in Gyeongsang-Namdo province, have been casting their ballots to choose their new representatives. Now, voter turnout as of 7 p.m. was at 48.1%. Now, it's only 2 parliamentary seats, but the by-elections will serve as a barometer of public sentiment in the traditional conservative province. Now, Changwon-Seongsan was relatively in the firm grasp of the Liberals. It used to be represented by Do Chan, a lawmaker with the Progressive Justice Party who committed suicide last year. And for Tongyang-Gosang, the main opposition Liberty Korea Party has long maintained a strong grip.
Now, Min-ji, I'm sure that rival parties and their candidates will be keeping close tabs on the ballot count. When can we expect the results?
Well, the results are going to start taking shape at around 10 p.m. tonight, so we've got a bit of a wait, and whoever wins will serve for about a year, as their term will last only to the April 2020 general elections. Now, as we're in for a bit of a wait, as I said, to get a clear picture, let me give you a glimpse of how things looked about a week ago. Now, a recent opinion poll showed that Yeo Young-guk, representing both the Justice Party and the ruling Democratic Party, in first place in the Changwon-Seongsan district. Now, the 2 parties merged their candidacy in a bid to secure more votes. For the Tongyang-Gosang district, Liberty Korea Party contender Chung Jum-sik was in the lead, trailed by Democratic Party candidate Yang Moon-seok. But there have been some issues that could turn voters away. The Liberty Korea Party was mired in controversy for campaigning at a local football stadium. Election laws prohibit candidates and party officials from wearing clothing displaying their number and name within the premises. The Justice Party faces a similar situation, having campaigned at a basketball game. As for the Democratic Party, a downside could be the economic slowdown and the presidential office's string of controversial cabinet nominations. Now, the outcome of today's by-elections will no doubt have significance for rival parties. For the ruling Democratic Party, the results will likely be a show of the voters' assessment of the Moon Jae-in administration. And for the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, it's the first election under its new leadership, so a win would be able to cement their standing and would also be a positive sign given the party's ties to ousted former President Park Geun-hye. That's all from me at this hour. Back to you, Arirang.
Well, thank you very much, Minji, for that report. That was our political correspondent, Kim Minji, reporting for us. Now, let's turn to some economic news. President Moon Jae-in got some harsh reviews of his economic policies during a meeting today with veterans of the business world. He was joined at a lunch meeting by former Bank of Korea governors, former senior government officials, as well as academics. And some of those visible policy failures he acknowledged. The president reportedly said that while the government has succeeded in raising incomes, it has not been as effective in narrowing the income gap. Moon plans to do more to close the gap and strengthen the social safety net. As part of his efforts to revive the economy, this was the latest in a series of meetings with the heads of big conglomerates, SMEs and venture firms. South Korea's finance minister has reiterated that the government is working on a supplementary budget bill to give the economy a much-needed shot in the arm. It should be out, he says, later this month. Kim Hye-sung reports.
The government is drawing up an extra budget bill. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi says the bill will focus on 3 areas: tackling fine dust, boosting the economy, and job creation.
We will review requests from government ministries and submit the extra budget bill to the National Assembly by late April.
He said the size of the budget has not been set, but it'll likely be lower than the IMF's recommended figure of nearly $8 billion. That's 0.5% of South Korea's nominal GDP, which the IMF said would be needed to reach the Korean government's growth target of between 2.6 to 2.7% for 2019. Hong emphasized that boosting the economy is critical amid slowing global growth that's dragging down the country's exports. At the meeting, he added the government will change the review process for a preliminary feasibility study of government infrastructure projects such as road construction. Changes include slashing the time frame of the review process from an average of 19 months to 10 months, lowering economic feasibility and increasing balanced development as evaluation variables for non-capital regions to help enhance balanced regional development. Since 1999, infrastructure projects requiring a budget of more than $44 million with over $26 million coming from state coffers have to undergo preliminary feasibility studies to ensure they avoid wasting taxpayers' money. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Now, there has been a huge downward revision from the World Trade Organization on global trade this year. The WTO has lowered its forecast for trade growth by almost a full percentage point. Our Ko Ryun-hee tells us why.
The outlook for the world economy remains bleak, as an intergovernmental trade organization is warning world trade will continue to face strong headwinds in 2019. The WTO announced Tuesday that world trade is expected to grow by 2.6% this year, which is sharply down from its earlier forecast of 3.7% made in September last year. The actual figure for 2018 was 3%, far lower than its outlook of 3.9%. As for why it changed its 2019 outlook, the WTO pointed to the ongoing trade spat between the world's 2 biggest economies.
The fact that we don't have great news today should surprise no one who has been reading the papers over the last 12 months. Of course, there are other elements at play, but rising trade tensions are the major factor to the stories today. Over the last year, we have seen a range of new tariffs put in place, affecting widely traded goods.
Other reasons include slower economic growth in North America, Europe, and Asia. The WTO also says the effect of the Trump administration expansionary fiscal policy is diminishing. Another reason is China changing its focus to services and consumption from manufacturing and investment. A chief economist at the WTO added that the situation might get worse if the U.S. decides to impose tariffs on imported cars, which could be up to 25%. Then how will this change affect South Korea? An expert in the field says the downturn could harm the export-based economy.
In Korea, the trade volume is around 70% of GDP. This figure is higher than other countries, so slower trade growth is negative for the nation's exports and economic growth.
The expert added that local companies should focus on diversification of export products and destinations and build relationships with emerging markets abroad. 고르니, Arirang News.
The head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, is warning that global economic growth has lost momentum and 70% of the world economy is likely to slow down this year. During a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington on Tuesday, she said downside risks for this year and the next include uncertainties over Brexit, global trade tensions, and unease in financial markets. However, she said the situation might improve thanks to the U.S. Federal Reserve's more patient pace in normalizing its monetary policy. The IMF will release an updated World Economic Outlook next Tuesday. Firefighters have managed to contain a forest fire in the southern port city of Busan after 18 hours on the scene. According to the Busan Fire Department, the fire that broke out Tuesday has destroyed around 20 hectares of mountain land near Haeundae Beach, which is equivalent to the size of 28 football fields. Hundreds of people have been evacuated, but no casualties have been reported. The police and other authorities began an investigation this afternoon, but the exact cause of the fire is yet to be identified. The number of South Koreans who live alone continues to grow, and the real estate market is changing to satisfy the country's single-person households. Our Kim Da-mi visited the 2019 Seoul Living Design Fair to check out the latest housing market trends.
What might future homes look like in a country where most people live by themselves?
In this space of less than 7 square meters, about the size of one room, you have everything you need for living: a work desk, built-in closets, bookshelves, and a cozy bunk bed.
With the percentage of Koreans living alone expected to rise above 30% for the first time ever in 2019, this so-called mini living style is designed to be suitable for all environments and locations, including the densely populated city of Seoul.
Making the most out of a smaller space is much more realistic and efficient in our current living conditions and environment.
Houses with interior designs and structures like this look much more practical and useful, especially for young people and college students who live in expensive duplex apartments.
In the snug spaces, modular furniture made up of multiple independent units allow people to combine their furniture in countless ways to create their very own custom home.
Customers nowadays look for furniture that they can organize and decorate their own spaces with. These modular pieces of furniture are especially functional for moving around.
Experts say as the number of people living alone continues to increase, there will be no such thing as permanent homes. Instead, markets for houses that are modular with versatile interior designs will emerge to satisfy the growing single urban population. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
LA Dodgers star Ryu Hyun-jin has picked up his second win of the 2019 Major League Baseball season. Ryu started the game against the San Francisco Giants at the LA Dodgers Stadium on Tuesday and kept the Giants to 2 runs in 7 innings with 5 strikeouts as the Dodgers won by 6-5. Ryu Hyun-jin now has a record of 6 wins and 6 losses against the San Francisco Giants and a career record of 42 wins and 28 losses. He has the 3rd most wins out of the Korean big leaguers behind Park Chan-ho and Kim Byung-hyun.
The remains of 10 Chinese soldiers killed during the Korean War have been sent back to their home country. They were repatriated following a handover ceremony today at Incheon International Airport, which was attended by officials from Seoul and Beijing. The remains will be buried in a martyrs' cemetery in China's northeastern city of Shenyang on Thursday. South Korea has been handing over the remains and relics of Chinese soldiers annually since 2014. The U.S. International Trade Commission has finalized its anti-dumping and countervailing duties on certain steel pipes. This will affect large-diameter welded pipes from South Korea and 3 other countries. The Commission said the measure was taken due to American producers being harmed by those imports. The duties will remain in place for 5 years. Take-out drink stores in South Korea have seen their sales dwindle amid the recent poor air quality, which has forced many people to stay indoors. One of the businesses to be hit was fruit juice franchise Juicy, which suffered a whopping 20% on-year drop in sales between late February and early March this year, when fine dust levels were at a record high. The firm said it is turning to delivery services to recover the lost sales and to reach more customers. The Yeouido Cherry Blossom Festival will kick off its 6-day run from Friday. To help people get the most out of the event, the Seoul Metropolitan Government is expanding public transport this weekend. On Friday and Saturday, 27 buses operating throughout Yeouido will run until 1:20 a.m. Subway Line 9, meanwhile, will run extra trains through the area between 2 and 8 p.m. As well as the beautiful cherry blossoms, the annual festival will also host an array of other events, such as small concerts and night markets. That's your 3-minute news flash. News in depth coming up next.
More than 7 decades have passed since the tragic April 3rd Jeju incident, but the incident still touches the heart of many here in Korea, with the wounds of bereaved families still unhealed. Today, we shed new light on the Jeju incident, which resulted in the worst civil tragedy in Korean history, second only to the Korean War. For that, we're joined by law professor Song Se-ryun at Kyunghee University. Thank you for coming in today.
Good to be here.
Could you start us off by talking a little bit about the historical significance of this April 3rd Jeju incident?
And now this incident, I think, is one of the saddest and one of the darkest in history the Korean government has. And there, about 30,000, I mean, official count is about 15,000, but reportedly it's about 30,000 people were massacred in one of the most extreme form of a McCarthyism campaign during the very uncertain time in Korean history. It happened in the late 40s and 50s, and it was chaotic times because this isolated island of Jeju, people were fighting against or suffering from the remnants of the Japanese rule, and also the new scare of the communist threats, and also confusion between what should happen and who should rule and govern the city. I think in that, what came out is a very small incident that just sparked the fire on this dynamite, and this small protest that happened against the police has escalated into a full-scale purge from the government and also the military. So it lasted about 7.5 years.
Right.
And also because of what happened during that time, the Korean War happened before and after, and there was a legitimate not legitimate, but de facto involvement of the communist faction in there also. So it complicates the history. And what complicates even more is a contributing factor of the U.S. military rule at the time that allowed the Japanese collaborators to remain in the rule.
Right.
So people are confused as to who they fight against.
It was certainly one of the most chaotic times in Korean history. The Defense Ministry has expressed regret and condolences for the bloody military crackdown during the Jeju incident. And this came for the first time in 71 years. Why do you think it took so long for them to apologize? And what does this first apology imply?
For the longest time, this this incident was kind of a hush-hush item for the government. Well, it's understandable. Right after the Korean War and the end of the Lee Seung-man regime, the next government was a series of military generals, Park Chung-hee and Chun Doo-hwan and Roh Tae-woo, that lasted until the early 1990s. So there was a kind of a scare about the communists and also about kind of hesitance to mention what the role was of the U.S. rule at the time. The first mention of this incident was in a novel in 1978. Even then, the author was taken into the custody and was tortured. So the unfortunate history that exacerbates this incident is that nothing has been known until well after a lot of the facts and also witnesses and the materials are lost. So the fact that the apology came late, I mean, while it was good that it finally happened, it was because of the long delay, but at the same time, I think there was some hesitance in the part of the politicians and the ruling party.
So we have to remember that this was one of the forbidden, sensitive topics that we could discuss in public.
Right.
Now, the Korean government has officially admitted the fact that there was a large-scale, violent military crackdown and apologized. But that apology didn't lead to actions that are deemed necessary for the victims and the victims' families. In fact, a special act on April 3rd Jeju Incident was tabled in 2017, but is still pending at the National Assembly. Could you tell us what this special act is and why it's still pending?
Actually, there are about 5 bills introduced in the National Assembly, and those kind of addresses some on the investigation side, some on the compensation for the victims. I think that going back to the unfortunate aspect of this incident is that the time has passed too much, that investigation is difficult, and finding out who the victims are and to what extent they're victims, technically at this point is very difficult to decipher. I mean, something has to be done, but in terms of how to set up the investigation, how to make sure that the deserved people are compensated and we don't miss those people who needs to be compensated. Probably that's a factor at this point. I see that both sides of the aisle are pretty much in agreement that something has to be done, investigated, and also compensated. But getting to the details is kind of a very difficult mountain to negotiate at this point.
Given that it happened such a long time ago.
Right.
But even so, President Moon Jae-in promised to get down to the bottom of this incident while also vowing to resolve the compensation issue. And Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun today also echoed the president, saying that he will steadily increase the support for the victims and the families. What are some of the remaining obstacles that are hindering the realization of these promises? You've just mentioned briefly about that.
Right.
But
I welcome the statements from the leaders. I think that has to be done. The learning from the history starts from knowing the history in the first place. So that requires investigation and uncovering a lot of facts that we still do not know. At the same time, the difficulty, again, is that appropriating funds for the victims and investigation and those resources have to come from National Assembly. And the fact that they are bogged down into details and also a little bit of a political squabble, I think that's a difficulty. But I think that the continuing push from the leadership, I think, is required to get something done in a positive way.
Well, sounds like a bumpy road ahead. Another thing President Moon promised is to discover the truth about the May 18th democratic movement. The Moon administration, unlike the previous administrations, is going all out to correct Korea's modern history that are often considered distorted. How do you see the government's efforts to shed new light on Korean modern history?
I think on one hand, I think you should welcome that the lost history should be uncovered and remembered. But at the same time, I would make a distinction between the 518 incident to the 4-3 Jeju Island, because 5318 Gwangju incident was more recent and actually been investigated several times, and there were legislations for compensation as well. So in terms of knowing and remembering the history, the Gwangju is light years ahead compared to Jeju incident. I think that at this point, people pretty much know who did it and what happened and who were the victims. And many of them were compensated. Now, there's some controversy as to whether compensation was adequate or not, whether they were deserving people who have gotten the compensation. But I think those were, at this point, there's a minor details compared to the Jeju Island incident.
Now, staying with the May 18th movement, ex-President Chun Doo-han attended a trial in a libel case for defaming priest Cho Bio in his memoir published last year. The next hearing is set for next Monday. What are some of the remaining issues regarding this case?
Now, this case is about the defamation against the deceased person. So at this point, you got to make this distinction between defamation against a live person who is still continuing to suffer, but deceased person does not have that. So the most important factor is the veracity of the statements or facts published, and the core, the fact that was in contention and the reason for the indictment was whether there was a shooting from the helicopter or not. And former President Chun maintained that there was nothing like that. He didn't order anything, and there was no evidence of that. But during the trial and through the investigations aforementioned, there were pretty compelling evidences to show that there was a shooting, and there was evidences that shows that, and also victim as well. So I would think that while I cannot predict the verdict correctly at this point, but I think there is enough evidence to make a determination one way or the other.
Now, some lawmakers have made strong or inappropriate, if you will, comments about the May 18th movement, stirring up a lot of controversy in the political arena. To this, some are voicing concerns that legal measures are necessary to prevent such mishaps from occurring again. What's your opinion on that?
Well, by saying that, I think what they're saying is that these people who are saying some different opinions about the 518 Gwangju incident is treasonous. It's usurping the democracy and the system of Korea. I wouldn't go that far. I think anything that sanctifies any historical fact is, you have to be very careful about that. And I think at this point, because of the several investigations and Gwangju incident has been designated as a foundation of our democracy, I think everybody knows that. The fact that there are some people, albeit some of the lawmakers, saying something different would not make it any different. I think, personally, I think that those people who are making the noises, I think they're at best making a political ploy. If so, then they should be judged or determined at the poll. They should be voted out if people think that they are making unnecessary and fake news noise. But it shouldn't be legislated because it has too much of a chilling effect on the freedom of expression. And I think that those political facts and historical facts should be debated and investigated, but not legislated.
One last question for you. Some are also voicing concerns that the Moon administration is focusing too much on the past, while many citizens are suffering, going through economic difficulties at present. What's your take on that?
It's a matter of priority. I think that I would join those people that you got to take care of what's happening now first, but the historical facts and those have been long neglected. So at some point you got to get to that. So at this point, you got to do both better. I think that the economic matters from this regime should be first priority. But at the same time, you have enough manpower to take care of both. So I think that this government should not put any, eggs in one basket, and if they do so, probably they'll be looked on as a diversion tactic to give the attention away from the economic mishaps they are making. I think they should just face up to what is happening in the economic side, and they have to make some correct decisions going forward.
Well, it sounds like a lot of pressure on the Moon administration, from
Right.
history to North Korea to the economy. Thank you so much for your insights today, Professor Song.
Thank you.
It's now time to take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's website.
And today we have another episode of Creator with Caroline Messier from Switzerland, showing off her vast collection of K-pop merchandise.
Yes, and don't forget, you, our viewers, can also become a creator. Just upload a video sharing your story about Korea to the email address shown at the end of this clip.
Stop me. Please, someone stop me from buying stuff that I don't really need, but I really want. Guys, welcome back to my show. Hello guys, welcome back to my show. 짜잔. Wow. This is what we do. Where am I gonna put all of this? I don't know. This is like paradise for me. So what we're gonna do in today's video is I'm gonna take you on a room tour. So my room is pretty much centered around K-pop, you know? I've been a K-pop fan for 10 years now, and yeah, this is my universe, and I'm trying to find ways to show my love for K-pop and appreciation for this through my decoration in my room. So without further ado, let's just go ahead. Alright, so this is my room. As I told you before, this is nothing too amazing. This is pretty basic. I'm a basic girl, I'm sorry. Anyway, so this is the first thing that you see when you get into my room. I printed out pictures of my biases, and I know I do have a lot. Alright, I do. I'm pretty sure the last time I counted, I had like over 130 albums or something. Monster X. It's not over. It's not over. Monster X. Monster X. And this is it. This is it. So some people might call me crazy or anything. I'm just here like, let me do me, okay? In this box, I put most of the things that I bought when I was in Seoul, you know. And most of them are still untouched because I'm too afraid of taking them out of the plastic wrap because for whatever reason. Even this piece of paper that I got during my stay over there, I'm not throwing away. No, it's just too cute. And well, this one is, needless to say, I haven't opened the box yet. Like, it's just safer inside, you know. This is a new addition to my room. I just added some lanyards that I got during some concerts. This one is the BTS and the other one are BAP. I'm a baby, so that explains it. And so for now, this is like my own little universe where I get to express and show my love for K-pop. And so that was it, you guys. That was my little room tour, you know. Don't hesitate to let me know what kind of items you guys have in your room. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.
It was a great day for a stroll here in Korea. Sunny sky and cool breeze.
That's right, and but the breeze is expected to turn into something much stronger later on. For the latest weather updates, let's turn to our Michelle Park, as we like to do, at the Weather Centre. Michelle, what's the latest?
Good evening, guys. The wind is getting stronger, like you said, and by tomorrow afternoon, the East Coast will see wind speed of up to 26 meters per second. Now, since the whole country is under dry weather alerts, please be extra careful with any sources of fire. And a high-pressure front will maintain our skies clear and raise our daily highs a few more notches tomorrow, whereas in Beijing, it's expected to be hotter than usual due to the southwesterly wind flowing in. Now, the commute on Thursday morning will be more comfortable temperature-wise, so we're waking up to 4 degrees Celsius, while southern regions such as Busan and Jeju wake up to 7 degrees. But the mercury will jump to beyond seasonal average readings as Seoul topping out to 16 degrees, Daegu at 20, while Gyeongju hit 17 degrees. Temperatures will stay warm from now on, but we can expect a slight drop after some precipitation over on Sunday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
We'll be back same time tomorrow with more domestic and global news update.